Hello Brockport students. Today we're going to try to familiarize you with the Recreational Dive Planner. The Recreational Dive Planner is a flowchart. It has two different sides. Typically you start on this side being the front side, and as you follow the flowchart you go at the starting point over, down, over, down. You see the arrows. It tells you here continue to the other side. At that point you could flip it over and it has down, over, and then back to the other side. One of the things you're going to notice is this particular area here gives a lot of really good information. Anytime you have questions and you don't seem to really know what the answer might be, you could take a look in there. It talks about diving at altitude, special rules for diving, if you're diving in cold weather, if you're doing repetitive dives, flying after diving, emergency decompression. So that is a good spot to potentially go to and look if they ask you a question, or if you're not potentially sure about what a little bit of information is. If it's not like a rote memory thing, this is a great area to potentially look. So let's start to learn how to potentially use this recreational dive planner. Across the very top we have depth in feet, we have pressure groups down the side, and in the middle area here we have amount of time diving. One thing that you can see is there's what's called a no decompression limit. Those are the black areas down through here. What this tells you is if somebody goes to a 30-foot dive, or a 35-foot dive I should say, they can spend no more than 205 minutes safely diving. If you end up in a gray area or black area, typically that requires a safety stop, as you'll see, although conservative divers will typically do safety stops no matter what. So let's start to kind of go through and figure out how to potentially use this. The book talks about a couple different questions that they ask you. One is they'll ask you a question of what is your ending pressure group? Another question is they'll ask you what is your maximum allowable bottom time? And another question is what is your minimum surface interval? One way to keep all that information organized is develop charts that look like this. When you're filling out a chart, the way that you potentially would do this is in this area here you could write the depth that you went diving. In this area here you'd write what is the amount of time that you spent on the bottom. Here you could put what is your pressure group after that dive. In this area here you could do your minimum surface interval, your pressure group afterwards, and then you could do the information for repetitive dives. But let's start off with a little bit of feeling through the chart. As we go through and we start looking at the chart, you can see it starts at 35 feet. So any dive that is less than 35 feet automatically rounds up to 35 feet. If I was to do a 36-foot dive, I would go round up to 40. So we're always rounding to the greater amount of depth. The next thing you'll see is down here there is the amount of time that you spend diving. So just like we did with rounding to the greater number, we do the same thing with depth. So if somebody was to dive to 37 feet, we'd round up to 40. And if somebody was to dive for a total of 40, let's say 6 minutes, we'd go up to 48. That would put them in this area here. Following the flow chart, we could go across and we'd see that person is a K diver. Then when people spend time at the surface doing a surface interval, you can see there's a different amount of time. The more time we spend at the surface, the more our body gets rid of the residual nitrogen. So if somebody was a K diver and they spent 33 minutes, that would put them between 30 and 37. If we fold this down, that would make their final pressure group an F diver upon getting out of the water. So let's start to kind of work through some of these problems. These are the most common type of problems that are potentially asked. What is your ending pressure group? Your first dive is to 81 feet for 21 minutes. You have a surface interval of 1 hour and 36, and then your second dive is to 59 feet for 25 minutes. What is your final ending pressure group? So let's start to use a little bit of the information that we know. We are going to take, for example, the amount of, my chart, sorry. We're going to take the information we have and put it into the chart so that way we can best begin to start to solve this. So an 81-foot dive for 21 minutes in the chart would look something like this. 81 feet. We're going to do that for 21 minutes. We're going to then have a surface interval of an hour 36. So during the surface interval area, we're at 1:36. Our second dive is to 59 feet for 25 minutes. So we're going to do this area here, 59 feet. We're going to do that for 25 minutes. The question is right here, what is our final pressure group? That's what they want to know. So let's start to kind of solve this with the information that we have. We look at our chart. We are going to go to 81 feet. We know that 81 feet rounds up to 90. And we're going to be there for 21 minutes. So we slide down and we see 21 minutes puts us as what we would call an M diver. As an M diver in pressure group M, we're going to stay there and we're going to be at the surface for what we said was an hour 36. So we go here, we see 126, 214, that falls in between. If we fall this all the way down, that puts us as a B diver. Now, since the flow chart tells us to go to the other side, we can take and flip it over and we use the information that we have here. Now, we're a B diver, as you can see. We're going to 60 feet, okay? At this point, what happens is we take a little bit of information that we have here, here, and here, and if you look down this area here, there's a little bit of kind of math that occurs. So I'm going to kind of solve the problem for you, and then we'll talk about how this math potentially got taken care of. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at some information. We know how long we're in the water for, 25 minutes. We know that we're a pressure group B. So we have this here. We know we're going to 60 feet. So we look over here where it says depth in feet. 60, we can slide these two things across to where B and 60 meets, and it's right here at 11 and 41. So I'm going to circle that one and make it so that you can see kind of what's going on here. That is where 60 intersects B. Now, one thing that we can talk about here is we can think of these two numbers here as a blue number, almost like an in the water number, and the white number as like a gas. Think of that as the residual nitrogen in your body. One thing that you're going to see about all these in this complete chart here is if you look at 60 feet, this entire column, okay, 42 plus 13 adds up to be 55. If we look at 11 and 44, it adds up to be 55. If we look at 16 and 39, it adds up to be 55. Well, there's a reason for that. If we were just theoretically to show you, flip over to the front side of the chart. If you're going to 60 feet diving, what's the most that we could spend there safely? Well, we only could spend 55 minutes at 60 feet, okay? Because that's how much we can take with the nitrogen that's kind of getting into our bloodstream and body tissues. So what we typically will do is, since we are a pressure group, we can spend less time than if we were not a pressure group. So somebody who is a B diver who is going to 60 feet, their body feels like they've been in the water for 11 minutes already because of the nitrogen that's in their body. Okay, what's the most that they could stay in the water? Well, that's 44 minutes is the most that they could stay. But they tell us in our question, you are diving for 25 minutes. So since we're a B diver, we need to add the residual nitrogen to this number. When we look back here again, the residual is 11. So we go here, we go 25 plus 11, that's a 6, 36. So what happens is the total bottom time, okay, and what that is that's our actual plus the residual, okay, and if you look here at this table here, it talks a little bit about it. You got your actual amount of time that you spend in the water, you have the residual time that you have, and that equals your total bottom time, okay? Our total bottom time is 36, and that was the actual amount that we were in, plus the residual that we looked up because we were starting at pressure group B, so that gives us this. So now the way that we solve this is we pretend that we go to a 59-foot dive for 36 minutes at the front part of our chart. So 59-foot dive goes up to 60, and we're gonna go as a 60, we're gonna go for 60 for 36, ends us as an N diver. So your final ending pressure group would be an N. That is how you solve what is your ending pressure group. So if they tell you your dive, they tell you your surface interval, and they tell you what your second dive was, how long you were in the water, you always, 100% of the time, need to do some simple math, okay? You do that math, you add the white number on the back side of the chart, and then you get your what's considered total bottom time, and then from there you solve it to find out what your pressure group is, okay? The next type of question that they ask you is, what's your maximum allowable bottom time? For this, they talk about your first dive, your surface interval, and your second dive, but they don't tell you how long you were actually in the water for. So they want to find out what your max is that you could spend in the water. So here is how we go and solve this question. For this type of question, we have our chart, okay? Our first dive is 51 feet for 24 minutes, so I'll write that in. 51 feet, and I'm going to be there for a total of 24 minutes. Then it says I'm going to be at the surface for 50 minutes. So my surface interval here is 50 minutes. And then they tell me my second dive is to 50 feet. So my second dive here is 50 feet. The question is, what is the max that I can spend in the water? So let's start to solve with the information that we know here. A 51-foot dive goes to 60. We're going to be there for 24 minutes, so I see 23, 25. I go to the greater number, that's I. So my pressure group out of the first dive is pressure group I. From pressure group I, I'm going to be at the surface for a total of what we said is 50 minutes. So we got to kind of follow through, and we see that gets me to here. I follow this down, whoop, try to get a little steadier. And that gets me to pressure group C. Now, for this question, we now still follow our flow chart. We flip the chart over, and we're going to put our fingers on the information that we know. We know 60-foot dive again, and we know this time pressure group C. Okay, right next to the little circle mark that I made. So let me just get rid of that for everybody without making it too messy. Okay, so I have C, and I have 60. There's a number of 14, and there's a number of 41. My body feels like it's been in the water for 14 minutes because that's residual. Well, what is the max that I could actually spend in the water? Well, the max I can spend in the water is 41 minutes. So the answer to this question will be 41 minutes. Okay, because I have a pressure group. The closer to A, typically the longer I could spend in the water, and the closer to, Z, X, Y, U, T, V, S, the less time that you could potentially spend in the water. So that is the way that you solve that. So when you get to the question and they do not tell you how much time you're in the water, you're going to look for the blue number, kind of think of it as the water number, and slide, for example, the pressure group across with the depth, find the two numbers, it's one of those two, and it's the blue in the water number. That is how you solve that question. The next question that you have is minimum surface interval. So this time they give you your dives, your first and your second, but they don't tell you how long you're staying at the surface. So what is your minimum surface interval? So first thing we're going to do is put our information in our chart. So in this chart here, we have first dive to 61 feet. 61 feet, we're there for 30 minutes. Okay, second dive is 59 feet for 39 minutes. 59 feet for 39 minutes. Okay, we can start by solving this because it should be one of the more simpler steps to do. So to do that, we got 61 feet, so that's 70. We're going to be there for 30 minutes. And that gets me to here. And that's, as you can see, puts me as an O diver. So now I'm going to write that in my chart. Now, at this point, we don't know what our surface interval is. We don't know our pressure group, but we know if we were to follow the flow chart normally, for this here, we'd go down. For the amount of time diving, we would get a pressure group and go over. So we were at O. We know that we don't know our surface interval, okay? We don't know our pressure group, but the flow chart tells us we're going to be on the back side of the chart. So here's how we go through and start to solve this. We have a lot of things occurring at the 60 feet, apparently. So we're going to put our fingers on the thing we know, our depth, 59 feet, so that goes to 60. So they're telling us we're in the water for a sloppily written 39 minutes. So what I do is I go and I'm looking for the blue number that is close to 39. So 60, go across looking for 39, and I see 16 and 39. So if I slide up, that means my pressure group must have been a D. Okay, so I have a D pressure group. And now, to figure out my minimum surface interval, I go here from O, and I see where it intersects D, that's here. And if I look where O intersects D, that is this box here. There's two numbers, 104 and 112. Well, the question is, what is the minimum? So I put the smaller of the two, which is 104. 104. So that was my answer for what is your minimum surface interval. So those are the three questions. Question number one, what is your ending pressure group? They give you your first dive, they give you your surface interval, they tell you how long you were in the water, 25 minutes. What do we have to do on this one? For these type of questions, if you remember, what's your final ending pressure group? There is always math involved in that one. You take what we had here, the time that you were in the water, and since we were a pressure group, we have to find your we need to find your residual nitrogen time. We did the math. Okay, that's the one where we slid down, we found the math, we added it together, and then went to the front side of the chart and solved it with our what's called total bottom time. The second question that we had is maximum allowed bottom time. This one, they don't tell you how long you were in the bottom of the water in the second dive, so they ask you what is the maximum that you could do. And if you remember for this style question, when we got to the second part of the chart, we had our fingers on the information we knew, C and 50 feet. So for here we had 50 feet and we had C where they intersected, and that gave us two numbers. And what we did was looked for the blue in the water number, and that was 41 minutes. The third style question that they had was, what is your minimum surface interval? We put that into our chart. We solved down and over to find our first pressure group. Then this is where it got a little tricky. We went to the back side of the chart. We put our fingers on the information that we knew. We knew 60 feet, and we knew 39 minutes. So we had 60 feet, slid across for 39 minutes, went up to pressure group D, and then at that point we knew we ended at D, so we had to go from O to D. We found out where those intersected, and that was 104. The three type of dive questions. Yeah, these basically can just kind of continue on, so people could do, to practice, you could do multiple dives, and they can ask you multiple questions, but that is the most part of how they go. Hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, email me and we can talk about it and try to work it out. Thank you.